First up is a new film called Friendship. It stars Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd, and I saw this way back at TIFF last year, and I remember waking up so early to go to the first screening of it I could, and it is so uncomfortably funny. If you are a fan of Tim Robinson's humor, this is chef's kiss perfect for you. If that type of stuff makes you crawl out of your skin, this is going to be the worst thing in the world for you to see. Now, I watched the entire film, and I would have assumed it had been written by Tim Robinson, but it's actually not. It's written and directed by someone called Andrew DeYoung. He's worked on a lot of really great comedy shows and series before, and he clearly knows how to utilize Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd. But this is really, it feels like a Tim Robinson vehicle. The two of them play neighbors. Paul Rudd is this cooler, relaxed dude who moves into Tim Robinson's neighborhood. Tim plays this kind of uptight, but also really bland, just generic suburban dad. And he becomes obsessed with Paul Rudd's character and trying to become friends with him. And this film is ridiculous and absurd. And again, if you like I Think You Should Leave, this is a perfect thing in the Tim Robinson universe. If you do not like jokes being held for a really long time and just really uncomfortable, and there's also a lot of yelling, just like the volume and energy level of this film often operates at an 11, which is something that, again, I will keep citing I Think You Should Leave, but you'll be used to if you are familiar with that. I do think this could be a scenario, because it is a feature film and not a bunch of sketches. There is a plot, there is character development. If you are kind of cuspy on I Think You Should Leave, this could be a good way to experience that type of comedy in a slightly more cohesive way. It also stars Kate Mara, Jack Dylan Glazer, and Josh Segarra, and I really enjoyed this film. It's absurd, it's uncomfortable. I think it is portraying male friendships in a way that we haven't seen in quite a while. I don't think it gives me 40-year-old virgin vibes, but it makes me think of the heyday of the Judd Apatow films. Not to say it's exactly like that, but it's just like you liked seeing these dynamics even though they were uncomfortable and absurd and hyperbolic. But it also was reflective, I think, of the evolution of comedy since then. Those were more slapsticky, and this has a bunch of physical comedy, but this just relishes in the uncomfortable, which my notes are nearly unintelligible from this, but the only thing I see I underlined to myself is Tim Robinson is the master of uncomfortable, and just also it's not exactly single white female, but it is taking from the playbook of that, which is kind of obvious from the trailers. I really enjoyed myself. I think, again, if you're in that weird kind of like stretch, like, oh, haha, you've laughed at a few of Tim Robinson's sketches, but maybe aren't obsessed with his entire body of work, this could be a fun thing for you to dip into. But if you know your sense of humor, because sense of humor is so incredibly personal, guide yourself appropriately. I, however, adored this film. I'm going to give it a 4.1 out of 5. The other thing I have this week is a series called The Four Seasons, and it stars Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Coleman Domingo, Will Forte, Carrie Kenny, and Marco Calvani, and based on that cast, you would think this is going to be set up to be a comedy. It is an adaptation of a 1981 Alan Alda film, which I didn't know. I didn't know that it was an adaptation of anything, so, going into it, I was like, okay, here we go. I found this deeply uncomfortable in a way that was not amusing versus something like Friendship, where the discomfort is the thing that you are actually probably intentionally going for. Again, I didn't think it was going to be zany slapstick comedy because, I don't think Tina Fey or Alan Alda in particular, or even like Steve Carell, maybe Will Forte and Carrie Kenny more skew towards that, but I've seen them in plenty of more grounded roles. So I didn't think this was going to be, zany ridiculous, right? I did think it would have more humor to counterbalance the dramatic points in it, because I had limited expectations. I didn't know a lot about it, but it is about three couples. So Steve Carell and Carrie Kenny play a couple, Coleman Domingo and Marco Calvani play a couple, and Will Forte and Tina Fey play a couple, and it's about their sort of interpersonal dynamics, both as couple relationships and then as a group of adult friends. And yeah, again, I thought I would be more amused by this. And I really felt bleak in a way that was not entertaining. I feel like it almost had a pessimistic outlook on life, which is totally fair, but it's not what I want to be watching right now. I feel like life is already pessimistic enough as it is, and so I want some level of escapism through my content, and even if that escapism is in the form of something darker or more dramatic, this just wasn't entertaining in any sense of any spectrum for me. And I don't know if this may be an age gap scenario where these characters are a little bit old. They're older than I am, and two of the couples have adult kids who are at college. That's not the stage of life I'm in, so I don't know or can't relate to that. But I would argue that if this was more gripping, I would relate to it plenty, because there have been plenty of things that I've watched through the course of my life that have people in different life stages where I still find myself invested and riveted and caring. So unfortunately, This was not for me, and I don't know who I would recommend it to because I just didn't think it was good enough in any particular direction in order to overcome some of the weaker points, because I think they all ended up being kind of weak. I don't have anybody I would recommend this to. So this is more of a warning than a review. So unfortunately, I would suggest skipping the 4 seasons.